Zoom. So,
Okay.
okay. So now Zoom is recording. Okay.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So welcome to another episode of the Way to College podcast. My name is Dr. Jose Saldívar, and I'm excited about my conversation today. I'm excited. I'm always excited about the conversations that I have with folks because I have wonderful and amazing guests who have incredibly rich stories. And today is no different. And so before we get started, I'm going to ask my guest to introduce herself. So Michelle, would you mind introducing yourself to our audience out there?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I am Michelle Singh. There's so many things that I would like to share, right? But first and foremost, I am a human being who leads with empathy. I value empathy so much because that was what got me through my educational experience as an immigrant, as someone who was made fun of because of being different. And so I'm an educator, a forever educator. I've been in education for 20 years, actually 21 years, and taught in one of the biggest school districts in the United States for 15 of those years. I'm a college professor of teacher education. I'm actually in my college classroom. I just finished a class just now, and I have a daughter who is at Howard University, a junior, and my husband, I have a husband too. 22 years together and 3 dogs. And so there, there's a lot of different layers to me, but ultimately what I want you to know about me is that I value empathy, I value relationships, I value connection, I value kindness. And that's how I lead, that's how I show up. Um, and that's what I look for in people.
I love that. I love that. So I'm excited because I'm a fellow empath. Yeah, well, I don't like to talk about myself, but absolutely, I'm incredibly empathetic. I think my students would probably echo that sentiment. I still teach part-time and at a university, and for me, I think that what I enjoy most is connecting with students and hearing their stories.
Absolutely.
And so thank you for sharing that, Michelle. Michelle, I ask all of my guests. We start with the same question. The question is, if you had to identify a starting point for your
Mm,
educational journey, what would
mm.
that starting point be for you?
A starting point for my educational journey. Okay. I would say the first impactful memory I had of my educational journey was I lived in Jamaica. I'm originally from Jamaica, grew up in Jamaica, moved to America in Miami when I was 9 with my family. So I remember my brother and I going to school one morning, and we were turned around by the principal of the school because my mom couldn't pay the school fee and we didn't get access to education because
Wow.
we could not afford it. That left such a mark on me. And I didn't realize it until I got to this big age. But it made me and it pushed me to value education above anything else. Now, that is a good and a bad, and I'll tell you why. It's good because our family did move to America for better opportunities, and so I did everything I could to make sure my education was number one. Did great in school, got scholarships, went to college, went to grad school, went to grad school, went to grad school, get my dissertation, right? All of the things. So I definitely took advantage of the educational access that we got here in the United States because that access was taken from me at such a young age, and it impacted me so much. Now, the other side of that is I valued education above everything, above the person, above the human, because for a long time, I saw people as their accomplishments. as who they were,
Mm,
because that is what I value. That's what
yeah.
drove me. And it took me time to reframe that. So to see the human first, not
Yeah.
just the person with the degrees.
Wow.
So
Wow.
yes, that's my first impactful
Oh
educational experience.
my gosh. You one, thank you for sharing that with us. Uh I can't imagine what that must have been like to be turned away and said, well, mom can't afford school this so you and your brother have got to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And then, okay, it's taken away from me. I'm gonna place this incredible value on education, but then to see sort of those accomplishments. And I don't think so. Thank you for sharing that and sharing sort of that dichotomy there. Um, but I don't think the second part, right? Placing those accomplishments above people. I don't think that's uncommon, right? I feel like a lot of us do that.
It's not. It's
Yeah.
a lot of us do that. And here's the thing that I noticed about myself. I allowed getting the degree to cause me to have limiting beliefs about myself, because there have been situations where my life experience makes me an expert at this thing, but because I
Hmm.
don't have that degree, I doubt that I can do that thing, because I
No.
place such high value on the actual accolade, the actual certification, the actual degree. And then it becomes like just checking off of a list game. So
Yeah.
I am just doing the thing to check things off of a list to fulfill this standard that I've set for myself of just trying to get at the highest peak in education, but I still feel a void. I'm not really like truly fulfilled, because am I really walking in my purpose then? Or am I just trying to check things off of a list because of what I've told myself about the value of education?
Wow.
So I've had to
Wow.
confront those things for myself. And I'm not saying that I don't value education, because listen, I have a daughter in college and she has scholarships, and she goes to a private school, Howard University in Washington, D.C., which is far away from Miami, Florida. And Lord knows that if she didn't get scholarships, she wouldn't be there. So I value education, but it is
Yeah.
my number one. My number one is who I am as a human being and how I show up as
Hmm.
a human being to others,
Mm.
and
Love that.
how I'm able to tell stories about my family not being able to pay for school. Like
Yeah.
I wanted to be so put together, and I wanted that to be how people saw me, all buttoned up and perfect, that I didn't allow the real me to come out to really connect with people. And I think that's how I allowed how that education and that just that craving for it.
So when does it happen? When does it happen for you where you kind of have to shift and you right and you recognize the person, or not necessarily, you still value the accolades, right? The accomplishments,
Yeah.
but you put the person first. When did that
Mm-hmm.
happen to you?
When did I realize that that's what I did? Was just a year ago, to be quite honest. 1 year ago.
Wow.
And I was, I say I have, there are four things that I need in my life to make sure that I'm living my life right and my mind is right. I need God, I need my therapist, I need a coach, and I need a community. Having those four things keeps me right. And
Yeah.
so being a part of, having all those four things, the past year, I've been doing just a lot of internal work to
Yeah.
identify the triggers, the things that cause me to be a perfectionist. And when I'm a perfectionist, I get stuck and I don't take action, and that cause me to have limiting beliefs and imposter syndrome. And I've been trying to work on identifying what is the root cause of those things. And it stems that the value of education and having all of the things in order is
Yeah.
one of the reasons that I have those qualities that I need to be aware of, to know when I'm triggered, to know what to do when they show up, and how to
Mm,
address them, to reframe so that I can get back to focusing on me as a human being and not me as a
yeah.
person with all of the degrees.
Yeah. Wow. You went heavy fast.
Ah!
And I love it. I love it. I love, that you're so honest and open with us and talking about, right. Because I think, we place this incredible value on education, and everybody's got that educational journey and that story. And when is that moment that, yeah, education becomes the utmost important thing in our lives, and whether it's messaging from folks or from our parents, or a story like yours. And so
Yeah,
I think we all wrestle with that, right? And then we all develop sort of our own relationships with education.
yeah,
So let me ask you, so here you are, you're a young child. What is it that your parents did for a living when you were growing up?
yeah. So, okay, so in Jamaica, uh, it was just my mom. So my mom, I didn't grow up with my father. He actually left Jamaica when I was very young and came to America. So my mom and my aunts and my grandparents. And so the time in Jamaica, we had a bar. And so that was what I remembered my mom and my family doing, just managing the bar. And my grandparents and some of my aunts and my uncles would come back and forth from America because they worked up here. They came back down there to bring stuff and bring money. And so it kind of was like that until we saved up enough and everybody got their papers, to the visas to come to America. And so once we were able to do all of that, we came to America and lived. And so when I came to America, my mom worked for Home Depot. And then she eventually went back to school and got her GED, and then she became a teacher. So she worked in the daycare for pretty much, yeah, pretty much, most of what I remember. So that's what my mom did.
Mhm.
And my dad, like I said, I didn't grow up with my dad. I have a relationship with him now that
Yeah.
I'm an adult, but I didn't grow up with my father. My grandfather was like my father, ultimately.
Early, other than that story, an incredibly powerful story, what kind of messaging did you get at home about education, about
Oh,
school?
that was education was the only way. That's
Yeah.
all. And here's the thing, because we were from another country, that was the only thing that my family knew, that we came here for better opportunities, and the way for a better opportunity was to get an education. Like, you cannot fumble this. You
Mm.
got the education is it. And so I took that very seriously, because remember, I also knew what it was like to have it snatched.
Yeah.
And so I took that seriously, and I did my very best in all of, graduated top of my class. I mean, I took it seriously, like so seriously to the to the point. So my best friend from childhood, she tells me that I need to loosen up, and I've needed to loosen up all my life, because I've always been so serious. Because I've always been so serious about education and being this perfect, this idea of perfect, that I've
Yeah.
never loosened up and shown, hey, look, I failed. I have fears and imperfections, and I can say it out loud. Like, I am just now being okay with talking about these things. I would not have been talking about these things 2 years ago. I would have been telling you all about my different degrees and my, accomplishments. I wouldn't have been here talking about failures and shame and all of those things.
Yeah.
But those things are what make me who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you going there and sharing that with us. Now, every kid gets asked this, right? You're growing up, you're going to school, you're doing well in school, you're graduating top of your class. What is it that you wanted to be when you grew up?
Yeah, good question. So I remember in elementary school for career day when we had to dress up. Um, I want to say my grandfather had a briefcase in the house. So I dressed up as the thing that I thought was appropriate, a lawyer. I had no really, I had no interest in being a lawyer, but I knew that
Yeah.
that was what my family would approve of, right?
Yeah.
And so for a little time, I wanted to be a lawyer, but deep down inside, I wanted to be a vet because I love animals. I mean, I say that, I want to grow up and be a vet even now. um, but I ultimately became a teacher because later on, like in middle school and in high school, I would always volunteer with the younger kids and I would do tutoring. And I thought that I was good at those things.
Mhm.
And so I went to college. And here's the thing, because you talked about this, um, with representation. When I was in high school, my school principal was a Black woman, Mrs. King. She's still alive, and she's delightful. And there was this program that I was a part of. It was called the Advanced Academic Internship Program, and so it was designed for high school seniors to be able to intern with the career that they wanted. And so I looked up to this lady so much that I wanted to be her. I wanted to be a principal, and I
Wow.
interned as her assistant. And so every day for my sixth period class, I would go to her in her office and observe her, do things with her, for her, because I wanted to be her. She was a Black woman in a position where everyone respected and valued her. She
Mhm.
created such a home, a safe place for just the school. I've never seen a high school with so much pride. The way, and I've taught in a few different high schools. I've never seen a high school that had that level of pride as my high school did. And I
Wow.
do credit it to her because of the environment that she created. And I wanted to be her. And when I went to college, I was like, yeah, I want to be a principal. And the people told me, oh, you have to be a classroom teacher before you become a principal. I was like, what? What am I going to teach? And so I remember the teacher, my English teacher, she told me, she's like, Michelle, you're a really good writer. So I was like, oh yeah, let me go ahead and become an English major so I could be this English teacher and go be a principal.
So you want to get into education, you want to be a principal,
hmm
and
I,
you've been an educator now, what, 21 years you said?
yeah.
21 years. So even as an undergrad, going away to college, you knew education, you never deviated from that path.
No, I never deviated. College of education. Yep, straight through. I knew I wanted to be a teacher. A lot of my volunteer work was with teaching as well. So I just knew
Yeah.
I wanted to be a teacher in some way. I was good at it. And I always loved sharing, and anything I learned, I wanted to share. And so yeah, I became an English teacher. And you want to know the irony in all of this? I never became a principal.
You too much in love with teaching.
Too much. I love teaching English in the classroom. Now, I did
Yeah.
spend 5 years at the district, and I worked with schools and administrators and teachers with educational technology and doing training and development for educational technology. So I love the technology as well, but I love the classroom. Like,
Yeah.
love teaching English. Just I call myself a forever ELA teacher because I love teaching high school English.
I love your story because I think um for a lot of folks, a lot of, it sounds like you were fortunate. You found something that you aspired to be, wanted to be this principal, and it led you, like you said, you had to teach in order to become a principal. And it was in teaching that you found your love, you found what it is that you're passionate about. I think for a lot of folks, it's usually they've got to try their hands at a couple of different things until they find that what they're truly passionate about. So kudos to you for finding that path. And let me ask you, before becoming a teacher, you are, you grow up in Jamaica, immigrate to the United States. And I can imagine was that transition difficult for you
Oh
as an
yes,
immigrant child? Yeah.
absolutely. The I've had lots of transitions in life. I want to say that was one of the biggest transitions, leaving a whole culture, a whole country, a whole everything that you've ever known, right? Like all my
Yeah.
toys, all of anything I could think of. I remember I left at 9, and I remember we couldn't pack. So um arts and carpentry and things like that, shoemaking and clothes making, that's not hard to come by in Jamaica. Like everybody does that. So it's easy
Yeah.
to get somebody to make shoes and make clothes and make furniture. So my mom had gotten me a, a bedroom set for my dolls, and it was handmade. So it was
Wow.
wooden bed with a mattress with a little dresser and what we call a whatnot, which is like I don't know, like an entertainment center.
Yeah.
And I love that little set so much because it was so unique. And I mean, it looked like real adult, furniture, but just the mini
Yeah.
version. And it was for my dolls, but we couldn't fit it in the suitcase. And I still
Ah.
remember hiding it in the house because I was hoping that one day I would go back and it would be there and I could bring it back. I never ended up going back to Jamaica until I was a teenager. And do you know, when I went back to the house, I looked in the closet where I hid it thinking it was going to still be there. I was like,
Oh,
God, let it be. So many people had been
wasn't it?
in and out that house. I know it ended up somewhere with someone who needed it, but lots of transitions. I shared that story because, I'm a 9-year-old kid and I love my toys. I love that sense of safety that, you know, having that kind of transition kind of breaks that sense of safety a little bit, because I'm no
Yeah.
longer in the place that I know well, with the people that I know, with the culture and the language that I know. Now I'm in a brand new place, um, in a new school. People are making fun of me because of how I talk and how I dress. I remember teachers, some of the teachers gave me like a school uniform, but that was back then before uniforms were mandatory. So I'm like the only kid wearing uniforms because we wore uniforms in Jamaica every single day. So for me, it wasn't a big deal to wear uniforms. So I
Yeah.
actually loved wearing uniforms because that's what we did in Jamaica. But people are making fun of me and bullying me, and I'm experiencing that as a 9-year-old kid again.
Yeah.
That belonging, that sense of safety, the rejection, all of that is what I felt. So yeah, lots of transitions, lots of fears, lots of rejection.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my gosh, that's so powerful. The when did you feel like, when you're in school, when you're in the United States, you're in school, when
Mhm.
did you feel like you were where you're supposed to be? Like, okay, I feel welcome.
When did I feel welcome? I will say I didn't feel welcome until I found a friend group that made me feel welcome, that made me
Mm.
feel like home. Um, in high school, I have a small crew, and we are still close today. We have a little text group. In fact, I messaged them not too long ago, and I was like, as I'm kind of going through my healing process, I'm like, I want to thank you all because you always gave me a feeling of home. And I never shared that with you all before, but I always felt like home with them because I didn't feel safe anywhere else. But with them, I could be myself. I could be, my hair's not put together. I don't have to have on like the best looking clothes. I could be myself. I could, laugh and be goofy. I don't have to be serious and get all
Yeah.
A's, right? And with that group, I mean, those are my dogs. Those are my homies, right?
Yeah.
That group is where I felt like home. And I will say that that's really like the only place I felt like home. I didn't feel at home at home. I didn't feel at home in school either because I
Wow.
couldn't be myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
I,
Who were
I
you
was on
expected to be at
edge.
home? Who were you
I mean,
expected
I
to
was
be at?
on edge. I feel like at home, I was expected to be I like to call it the golden child, because I'm the one, first generation college student, first one to go to college. I'm the one that got all the good grades. I'm one of the oldest, second oldest cousins. So I'm kind of like the one that the other ones are looking up to as well. So I felt like I had a role to play there and I couldn't mess up. I
Mm.
couldn't fumble there.
Yeah.
Couldn't fumble at school either.
Wow. That's a heavy burden to carry,
Oh yeah. I realize
particularly for a young person.
I realize that now, yeah. But I've carried that up until I started this process of healing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not new, I didn't know that I carried it. And that's also why I was so afraid to fail. I was so afraid of failure. I was so afraid of rejection. I, all of those, because I had to be so put together, I was afraid of those things because those things told me that I wasn't good enough. And it was that, and that's why I I wrote an article for Edutopia about,
Mm.
embracing failure. And that's why I talk when I teach my classes to the new teachers, I talk about the idea of embracing failure as an opportunity for growth, embracing your limitations, your what they call weaknesses. These are opportunities for growth. I just had this conversation today with my class.
Mm. I love that. I love that. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think, yeah, I think we need to embrace, right?
Hmm.
And yeah, I can go off on a tangent about I've been thinking actually about that very thing the last couple of days, because we'll be starting a new semester for us on Monday or Tuesday, I'm sorry. And I'm still sort of, my mind still last semester about in students' their experiences with failure. So thank you for sharing that, Michelle. You get into education, you're an educator, a longtime educator, but you're doing some other work.
Hmm.
You do some other things.
Hmm.
Can we talk about the work that you're doing now outside of your teaching, which is incredibly important, which is central to who you are, right? But but tell us about the work that you're doing and why.
Hmm.
Why choose to do that work? Why is that work so important as well?
Ooh-wee. Okay, so I left um I left my full-time job at the public school in 2019, ultimately because I was in a work environment that did not serve me well. I was in a toxic work environment and I was deteriorating and I couldn't take it anymore. And I got an opportunity where I could leave and I left. I left my 15-year career into this opportunity that I didn't know what it was going to be. But I just knew that if I had stayed in the job, I my health, my mental, physical, emotional, all of the healths were failing, all of them.
Yeah, wow.
So that was the start of something that I didn't know, because initially when I left, I was leaving just to work as a consultant for Microsoft, as a Microsoft learning consultant. And I was like, man, I got this, I got this, I'm going to do this. This is it. This is it. I'm doing the technology. I'm doing the teaching. I'm still doing teaching and training. I'm just doing it in a different setting.
Hmm.
And I'm no longer working with high school students. I'm working with the teachers. But the teachers are still impacting their own students. So I still feel that connection there, right? And when I did that for a year, but it kind of opened my eyes to what it was like on the other side and what the other side was doing, corporate, the corporate world, and
Yeah.
what they were doing and how they were connected to education and how I could be a different type of teacher. And so that led me to ultimately start my educational consulting business. And I do teacher training and development. I focus on culturally responsive pedagogy, and I focus on implementing educational technology so that teachers can create inclusive environments for their students. But ultimately, what I have found in my time working with teachers and in my research and everything that I have been doing, what I've found is that if the teacher is not connected to themselves, they don't have capacity to be connected to their students or anybody else. So there is inner work that has to be done for that teacher to become engaged with who they are and what they are, so that they can show up fully for themselves and for their students.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the work that I'm doing now, is helping women educators, women education leaders, particularly women education leaders of color, address the mindset blocks that keep them stuck,
Yeah.
especially if they're transitioning, like from a teaching role to a leadership role, or even trying to figure out if they want to transition from being in education to doing something else. Helping them identify triggers. What are those core feelings and core events of their life that has caused them to behave in a certain way?
Mm.
And what has that cost them? And the other thing is embracing wellness, but more so rest and self-love.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead.
So, I mean, this is powerful work, right? And so my question is, when did you realize this was necessary, and or was it just a matter of you reflecting on your own experience, recognizing your needs, recognizing your own development, right?
Mhm.
That it led you to this work?
It's both. It's me recognizing that that's what I needed, and that's what
Mm.
I needed to do. I needed to unpack and unmask and reveal all of the things so that I could show up better. And I am connecting so much more authentically with people. My relationships are stronger because I'm showing up more as like me, who I
Yeah.
am. So it 50% of it is me, but 50% of it is also talking to, coaching, working with other women who have these same exact blocks, things that keep them stuck, these same behaviors. They suffer from the perfectionism and the imposter syndrome and the self-doubt, and all of those things have, there's a reason why all of that happens. You have to get to the core of what that is. And I have done the work to figure out how to get to the core. And
Yeah.
I can help you with that as well, because I've done the work and I have the strategies.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you've done the work. I'm glad you're making yourself available to teachers and sharing those strategies. You know, when I believe it was your assistant reached out to me and talked about the work that you're doing. And so, you know, there was something that really piqued my interest, and it was about, and we just talked about this just before getting into the work that you're doing, but turning setbacks into these growth opportunities. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, would you like to speak to that specifically? So like you're working with these teachers, you're working with that, helping them unpack. Um, when we talk about turning setbacks into growth opportunities, how do you present that to them? And what's maybe, you know, we don't want to give everything away, but maybe
Yeah.
what's one tip you share with the teachers?
I would say that the biggest thing I would say is um reframing, really looking at that setback and try to reframe it. So I actually had this conversation with a client last night. They thought that they experienced a setback, but when we reframed it, it wasn't a setback. It was her actually establishing her boundaries and saying no to something that didn't serve her anymore.
Oh,
And she
wow.
thought that walking away from that particular opportunity was a failure. She felt like a failure because she didn't complete it, but she was actually honoring her boundaries.
Yeah.
So how can you look at what that thing is and reframe it to find the positive in it. How does it serve you well? There's a reason why whatever happened happened. There's a lesson in there somehow. What is the lesson in that particular experience? Find the lesson, because with that lesson comes growth. So what's the lesson and what's the blessing? Those are the two things I always look for in opportunities that don't work out and that do work
Mhm.
out. What is the lesson and
Mhm.
what's the blessing? You
What do
might,
you mean by that? What do you mean by that? What do you mean? What is the blessing?
there's always a blessing in something. We might see a door closing for us, but that may be God telling us that, okay, you're done with that assignment. I'm going to give you something bigger. And I don't know what that bigger is until it comes. But if I didn't
Yeah.
close that door, I would have never opened up space for that bigger to come to me. So there is always a blessing in it, because opportunity, I believe everything happens. I know this is cliche, but I'm a woman of faith, and I believe God makes things happen for a reason. And we may not see the benefits of it, but they will reveal themselves in the future. So try to think of the blessing, like, what is God trying to teach me in this moment? That's the
Hmm.
blessing. What is God trying to teach me in this moment? It's the lesson,
Mm.
the blessing, because
Yeah.
that lesson is a blessing from God, because I'm learning from
Yeah.
it and I'm gonna grow from it. And it's going to teach me something that I'm going to be able to use in the future. It's building my character, it's building my resilience. So even though it may feel raw and it may hurt, it's uncomfortable, there is a lesson and there's a blessing in it, because you're going to need that strength for what's to come.
Wow. I love that. I love that. I love
So
that. Thank you.
the lesson and the blessing, if I had to give just one thing, find the lesson and the blessing in the failure. I started off saying something else, but the lesson and the blessing will
Mm.
help you to reframe, though.
Yeah. Well, no, I think it's perfect, right? A lot of times we look at something, or you said, we close the door. The client that you spoke to, right, was setting boundaries, not recognizing it, saw that maybe as a lost opportunity, right? And we
Mhm.
reframe it to think about, well, what's the lesson that I'm being taught, and what is the blessing? Because there is a blessing there. I think it's
Amen.
powerful. I
Amen.
think that's powerful, and I think that's spot on.
Yeah. God don't play
Mich-
about his people.
No, absolutely not. No, Mich Michelle, as we thank you for your time today. I'm excited about the work that you're doing. I'm I think it sounds like, what you've shared with us, where you've taken us today in all of setbacks, right? That
Mhm.
there are blessings and there are lessons along the way, countless
Yeah.
lessons and blessings. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for doing the work and helping others to do that same work, because I think that's incredibly powerful tool, that I think a lot of us can use. A lot of us, right? We are so quick to react, and we see something, and we see a lost opportunity, and that's all we see, and we can't get past that, right? But that reframing and thinking about that lesson and the blessing, absolutely powerful work. So thank you for the work that you're doing as we head out, because I do want to be mindful of your time. You've got three dogs and a husband at home, and so I want to, yeah, I don't, yeah, everything that you do, I know you've got a lot on your plate. As we transition out, as we transition out, any final thoughts, any final words you'd like to leave with our audience out there?
I will say that you can't do it alone. You cannot do this work alone. You can't, you need, like I told y'all, I had like 4 support structures. I have God, I have my therapist, my coach, and a community. That's 4. You could choose just one.
Yeah, yeah,
But you can't do it alone. You're gonna be it's gonna be lonely, and you're not gonna move. You're not gonna have momentum when you are alone. You're not gonna have that accountability to tell you to go a little bit further. So you need to have some kind of some kind of network, some kind of community, some kind of support, some kind of just something to help you along the way. So I would say seek out support, whatever that support looks like for you. So, you have to have that.
Thank you. I think that's the perfect way to end our conversation today, Michelle. Michelle, thank you. Thank you for your story. Thank you for the lessons. I'm incredibly appreciative of it. I'm incredibly appreciative of your time today because I know it's valuable. And I know your story is going to resonate with so many of our listeners out there. So I appreciate it. Appreciate you too.
I hope so. I really do hope so. And thank you for having me. And I can share my website if you're interested in.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
So,
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
oh, no. So if you're interested in connecting with me, you can go to empty2 empowered. So that's the word empty, the number 2 empowered.com.
Okay.
empty2empowered.com.
I'll make sure we also add it to the show notes.
Okay.
So
Yes.
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. So yeah, I enjoyed our conversation. Didn't know I was going to talk about some of the stuff that I talked about, but hey, I mean, listen, I go where I go where God tells me to go.
Well, I appreciate it.
There might be somebody out there that, that needs that message.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think it was a powerful message. And I'd even venture to say it's a universal message. So thank you. Thank you. This concludes another episode of Way to College podcast. Thank you to my guests. Thank you to our listeners out there. Please make sure you subscribe, rate, follow, all of that good stuff. And do me a favor and share the podcast with one other person. I'd appreciate it. Talk again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, I think you can stop it.
Okay, let me grab my mouse. All right, are you sure?